The black limousine rolled through the iron gates of the Sterling estate, its polished exterior catching the late afternoon sunlight. Billionaire Ethan Sterling sat in the backseat, staring out at the sprawling gardens that had been untouched for years. He had traveled the world, built empires, signed contracts worth billions, but nothing compared to the peculiar ache in his chest as he returned home. For years, this mansion had stood empty, waiting for him like a silent monument to his success and his solitude. He had promised himself that this time, his return would mean peace. No board meetings. No cameras. Just quiet. He wanted to hear his own thoughts again, wanted to feel something beyond profit margins and stock tickers. The car slowed in front of the grand entrance, and Ethan stepped out, his sharp suit contrasting with the softness of the place he once called sanctuary. He inhaled deeply, expecting the cool scent of pine and freshly cut grass. What he didn't expect was the sound, the clear, carefree sound of laughter drifting over the hedge from the house next door. He froze, the sound tugging at him like an invisible string. It wasn't just laughter. It was warm, melodic, alive. Something about it stirred a memory he thought he had locked away years ago. Against his better judgment, he moved closer, following the sound like a man caught in a spell. Through the narrow opening between the trees, he caught sight of a small gathering. Children running across a neatly trimmed lawn, a woman standing on the porch, her head tilted back in laughter. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew that laugh. He knew that voice. Naomi Brooks. The name crashed into him like a wave, knocking the air from his lungs. There she was, the woman he had once loved with every part of himself, the one he had let slip away because of pride, family, and fear. Her skin glowed under the golden sun, her curls framed her face, and her smile was as radiant as he remembered. Ethan gripped the iron railing beside him, his knuckles whitening. Years of distance, oceans traveled, fortunes earned, none of it erased the truth. His new neighbor was Naomi. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Sterling felt utterly unprepared. The sight of Naomi sent Ethan spiraling backward through time, to a chapter of his life he had never truly closed. He could still see it, the ivy-covered walls of the university, the autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet as they walked across campus together. Naomi Brooks had been unlike anyone he had ever met, sharp-witted, bold, and unafraid to challenge him. While other students tried to impress him for his last name and family fortune, Naomi never cared. She laughed at his arrogance, pushed back on his ideas, and in doing so, stole his guarded heart. Their romance was a secret flame, burning in corners of libraries, late-night diners, and quiet walks by the lake. She was the daughter of a working-class family, and he was the heir to the Sterling Empire. They lived in two different worlds, but when they were together, those worlds blurred. Ethan remembered promising her the impossible, that love would conquer every obstacle. But love, as they discovered, was not invincible. His family disapproved, their disapproval wrapped in smiles and sharp warnings. A Sterling marries for legacy, not for whim, his father had said, every word a command. Naomi faced whispers, glares, and outright insults. Why waste your time? People sneered, as though her presence by Ethan's side was an offense. Ethan had been young, torn between the woman he loved and the expectations chained to his name. Naomi had been strong, refusing to let herself be humiliated. Their arguments became more frequent, fueled by exhaustion and unspoken fear. One night, standing in the shadows of the university library, she had told him through tears, "I won't be your shame, Ethan. If you can't stand with me, then let me go." And he had let her go. The memory was like a knife twisting in his chest. He had chosen silence, retreat, and ultimately wealth, building an empire that stretched across continents. But every contract signed, every acquisition celebrated, was haunted by the echo of what he'd lost. Naomi's absence had left a hollow space no success could fill. For Naomi, the scars ran just as deep. She had walked away with dignity intact but a heart fractured. She had learned quickly that love did not shield her from the weight of prejudice or betrayal. She carried those wounds quietly, her resilience becoming both her shield and her prison. Now, years later, fate had set them side by side again, neighbors divided by a fence but bound by a past neither of them could erase. Ethan didn't plan it, at least, That's what he told himself as he walked across the perfectly trimmed stretch of lawn separating his estate from the house next door. His steps were measured, his shoulders squared in the casual confidence of a man used to commanding boardrooms. But inside, his pulse hammered like a young man on his first date. Naomi stood on her porch, holding a watering can, her gaze focused on the flowers spilling over their pots. The sunlight kissed her skin, and for a brief second, Ethan was back in those university days, watching her scribble notes furiously while ignoring the stares of everyone else in the room. "Naomi," he said at last, his voice low but steady. She turned, and the watering can tilted slightly in her hand before she caught it. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then cooled into polite recognition. Ethan Sterling. The way she said his name, measured, formal, cut deeper than any insult. He forced a smile. "I didn't know you lived here. Seems fate has a sense of humor." Naomi arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Or irony." She set the can aside and folded her arms. "What brings you back to the neighborhood? Last I heard, you were too busy buying half of Europe." The jab was subtle, but it landed. Ethan swallowed. "I needed some quiet. Thought I'd come home for a while." Her expression softened slightly but never lost its guard. "Well, welcome back." The words were polite, but distant. Silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words left unsaid. He wanted to ask if she was happy, if she had thought of him, if the years had healed or hardened her. But instead, he said, "The garden suits you. You always had a way of making things grow." Naomi's lips twitched, almost a smile, almost a memory, but she pulled it back quickly. "Some things grow stronger with care. Others die when neglected." Ethan felt the sting. Her meaning was clear, and no clever response could erase it. He nodded slowly, retreating behind the mask of calm he wore so well. "You're right. I hope, maybe we can talk sometime." Naomi gave him a polite nod, nothing more, before turning back to her flowers. And Ethan, billionaire, world traveler, master negotiator, walked back to his mansion feeling more defeated than any boardroom battle had ever made him. Naomi Brooks had built her world piece by piece, brick by brick, with no safety net and no shortcuts. Life had demanded resilience, and she had answered with determination. By day, she was a respected architect whose designs graced magazines and whispered through boardrooms. By night, she was a devoted mother, guiding her son Malik with the same steady hand she had used to rebuild herself. Her home reflected that journey. Every corner told a story, framed sketches of her earliest projects, vibrant art Malik had made in school, and furniture chosen for comfort rather than prestige. It was a space filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet hum of a life earned rather than given. Malik was her pride. At 10 years old, he was bright, curious, and endlessly talkative. He peppered her with questions about everything. Why the sky was blue, how bridges held so much weight, why some people were cruel. Naomi encouraged his curiosity, knowing that knowledge was the key to the future. Raising him alone had been no easy feat, but the love between them had become her compass, keeping her steady when the road grew rough. Professionally, Naomi had carved out a place in a field that was often dismissive of women, especially women of color. Her designs balanced elegance with sustainability, and her reputation had grown steadily, not because of connections but because of undeniable talent. She was invited to panels, praised in journals, and, most importantly, trusted by her clients. For Naomi, success wasn't about glory. It was about proving to herself that she could stand without anyone's permission. When Ethan saw her again in this new light, it rattled him. He had known Naomi as the fiery, ambitious college student with dreams bigger than her circumstances. Now, standing in the house next door, he saw a woman who had transformed that fire into power. She no longer needed validation, no longer looked at him with the wide-eyed trust of youth. She carried herself with independence, her presence commanding respect before a word left her lips. From the window of his study, Ethan sometimes caught glimpses of her, guiding Malik through homework at the kitchen table, laughing as they raced each other to the car, or staying up late with rolls of blueprints spread across her desk. Each glimpse filled him with a bittersweet mix of admiration and regret. This Naomi was different. Stronger. More complete. But beneath the strength, Ethan sensed the same vulnerability he had once held close, the heart that loved deeply, even when it hurt. And though she might not admit it, Ethan wondered if that heart still remembered him. The Sterling estate was silent at night, a kind of silence that pressed against Ethan's chest and reminded him how empty space could feel. He sat in his study, the fire crackling low, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound books he had never bothered to read. His phone buzzed with updates, stock prices, business alerts, invitations to galas. He silenced it with a flick of his hand. None of it mattered. Not tonight. For years, Ethan had measured his worth in numbers. Net worth, market shares, profits. He had climbed to the summit of wealth, but the higher he went, the lonelier it became. Tonight, staring at the crystal glass of scotch in his hand, he admitted what he had refused to for years. Money had never filled the void Naomi left behind. Seeing her again had cracked open wounds he thought had healed. She was stronger now, radiant in ways that made him proud and ashamed at once. Proud because she had become everything he always believed she could be. Ashamed because he had abandoned her before she could become it. He wrestled with the question clawing at him. Should he chase this second chance, fight for the woman he had once been too weak to fight for? Or should he respect the wall she had built around her life? Naomi wasn't the girl who used to sneak into his dorm at midnight with coffee and laughter. She was a woman with a son, a career, a carefully constructed world. Did he have the right to intrude? His heart screamed at him, go to her, make it right, prove that love still burned between them. But his pride, that cold, calculating part of him that had made him billions, whispered caution. What if she rejected him outright? What if chasing her only confirmed what he had always feared, that he had lost her forever? Ethan set the glass down and leaned forward, pressing his palms against his knees. For once in his life, there was no boardroom strategy, no financial solution. This was a battle of the heart, and he didn't know which side to choose. The neighborhood had a tradition of hosting a summer block party, tables lined with food, music drifting through the air, and children weaving between the legs of adults with sticky fingers and laughter. For Naomi, it was a chance to blend in, to let Malik run free while she caught up with neighbors who had become friends. She hadn't expected Ethan to show. But there he was, standing near the grill with a glass of iced tea, his tailored shirt rolled at the sleeves, looking infuriatingly at ease. Naomi stiffened the moment their eyes met. She turned quickly, hoping the crowd would shield her from further interaction. "Mom, I'm going to play soccer," Malik shouted before dashing off with a group of boys. Naomi waved absent-mindedly, her focus still locked on avoiding the one man she least wanted to confront in such a casual setting. Ethan, however, noticed her attempts to disappear. He didn't chase her, at least, not directly. Instead, fate intervened in the form of Malik. The game of soccer drifted dangerously close to Ethan, and when the ball rolled toward him, he bent down and scooped it up with surprising agility. "Who's the striker here?" he called, his voice carrying that easy charm. Malik darted forward, grinning. "That's me." Ethan chuckled, tossing the ball gently back to him. "Good form. You've got speed. Ever think about joining a team?" The boy's eyes lit up. "I already play at school. I'm the fastest runner." Naomi, watching from a distance, felt her heart sink. She could see the way Malik leaned toward Ethan, drawn to his attention, his confidence. It was so effortless, so natural, and Ethan had no idea he was talking to his own son. They played a short game of passes, Ethan laughing as Malik tried to outmaneuver him. The sight pulled at something deep in Naomi's chest. She had raised Malik to be independent, to never feel the absence of a father, yet here he was bonding with Ethan in a way that felt painfully right. When the ball finally rolled off again, Malik beamed up at him. "You're cool. Do you live around here?" Ethan smiled, nodding toward his estate. "Right next door." Naomi stepped forward then, her tone clipped. "Malik, it's time for food." Her son groaned but obeyed, giving Ethan a quick wave before running back to the tables. Ethan's eyes lingered on Naomi, his expression unreadable. She met his gaze for only a moment before turning away. And though no words were spoken, Ethan felt it. The spark between them wasn't gone. It had only been buried. The block party wound down as the sun dipped low, string lights flickering to life above the street. Families began gathering plates, children reluctantly dragged inside, and the music softened to a hum. Ethan saw Naomi preparing to leave, Malik tugging at her hand, and knew this was his moment. "Naomi," he called gently, stepping away from the crowd. "Could we talk? Just for a few minutes. A walk, maybe." She hesitated, her jaw tightening, but something in his voice, or perhaps the way Malik ran off to grab another soda, made her agree. "Fine. 5 minutes." They walked along the quiet edge of the neighborhood, where the glow of the party lights faded into shadows. Ethan shoved his hands into his pockets, searching for the right words. "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to explain. Back then, I was young, torn in too many directions. My family." Naomi stopped sharply, turning to face him. Her eyes burned. "Don't you dare blame this on your family. You had a choice, Ethan. And you chose them. You chose their wealth, their legacy, their comfort, over me." The force of her words hit harder than he expected. "I thought I was protecting you," he said quietly. "From the judgment, from the whispers." "Protecting me?" She laughed bitterly. "No, you were protecting yourself. You didn't want the shame of standing beside me when it mattered most. Do you know what that felt like? To be told I was worth loving in private but not in public." Ethan flinched. Every word was a mirror reflecting the cowardice he had tried to bury. Naomi turned away, hugging her arms around herself. "I rebuilt after you, Ethan. I learned to live without the promises you broke." He stepped closer, voice rough. "And yet, here we are. I've never stopped regretting it. I've never stopped," he faltered, then pushed on. "I've never stopped loving you." She froze, shoulders stiff, but didn't turn. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken truths. Finally, Naomi whispered, almost to herself, "Love isn't enough. Not then, not now." But Ethan heard the tremor in her voice, the faint crack in her armor. Beneath her fury, the affection remained, buried, fragile, but alive. Later that evening, Naomi tucked Malik into bed, his hair still damp from his shower and the scent of cocoa butter lotion filling the room. He wriggled beneath the covers, restless with the energy of the day. "Mom?" he asked, eyes bright with curiosity. "Yes, baby." Naomi smoothed the blanket over him, bracing herself for the kind of questions Malik was known for. He tilted his head, thoughtful. "Why does Mr. Sterling look at you like that?" Naomi froze, her hand stilling on the blanket. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. Malik shrugged, his expression innocent but sharp. "I don't know. Just different. Like he knows you. Like, you're important." Her throat tightened. She searched for an answer, but none came easily. Malik had always been perceptive, far more than other children his age. He noticed things most adults overlooked. She forced a smile. Sometimes grown-ups share a past, and it shows on their faces. That's all. But what kind of past? Malik pressed. "Like friends." Naomi sat on the edge of his bed, brushing his curls from his forehead. "Something like that. We knew each other a long time ago. Before you were born." Malik studied her with those deep, questioning eyes that reminded her so much of. She shut down the thought before it could finish. "Do you like him?" he asked. Her chest ached. "I respect him. But what matters is what you think." Malik grinned. "He's cool. He plays soccer with me like Uncle David does, but he doesn't get tired so fast." His eyes sparkled with admiration. "And he listens, Mom. Grown-ups don't always listen, but he did." Naomi kissed his forehead, whispering, "I'm glad you had fun. Now, time for sleep." She turned off the lamp, leaving only the soft glow of the nightlight. Across the street, Ethan stood at his study window, the faint hum of the neighborhood settling into silence. He replayed his brief interactions with Malik, the boy's sharp questions, his laughter, the easy way he carried himself. There was something striking about him, a brightness that went beyond charm. He was curious, kind, and remarkably thoughtful for his age. Watching Malik had stirred something Ethan hadn't expected, a glimpse of Naomi in miniature. The tilt of his head, the fire in his questions, the way his smile carried light. Ethan felt an ache he couldn't quite name, an invisible thread tugging him closer to both mother and son. And though he didn't know it yet, Malik was more than a reminder. He was a piece of Ethan's own unfinished story. A few days later, Naomi arrived at her office early, coffee in hand, ready to dive into a stack of design proposals. She had barely settled at her desk when her assistant stepped in with a nervous look. "Naomi, Mr. Sterling is here to see you." Her heart skipped, but she quickly composed herself. "Send him in." Ethan walked in with the same ease he carried into every room, though she noticed the faint tension in his jaw. He didn't waste time with small talk. Instead, he laid a leather folder on her desk. "I'm developing a new project," he said, his voice calm but direct. "A cultural center. Something modern but rooted in history. I want it to be more than glass and steel, I want it to mean something." Naomi arched an eyebrow, skeptical. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I need the best architect I know," he said simply. "And that's you." The compliment caught her off guard, though she didn't let it show. She flipped through the folder, scanning his notes. The project was ambitious: community spaces, art installations, sustainable design. It was the kind of commission that could elevate her career to new heights. But it also came with him. Naomi closed the folder slowly. "You really think it's wise, Ethan? Mixing business with whatever this is?" He leaned forward. "I'm not asking for personal favors. I'm asking for your talent. If you weren't my neighbor, if we didn't share a past, I'd still be here. You're the right person for this." His sincerity unsettled her. She had fought too hard to establish herself as a professional, to be taken seriously in a world that often dismissed women like her. The last thing she wanted was whispers that she had been handed success because of a billionaire's affection. "I don't want anyone thinking I need you to advance my career," she said firmly. "I've built everything I have on my own." Ethan's eyes softened. "I know. That's why I respect you enough to ask." For a long moment, Naomi sat in silence, weighing the risk. On one hand, working with Ethan meant stepping back into a world she had fought to leave behind. On the other, this project could showcase her vision to an even wider stage. And wasn't that what she had always wanted? For her work to speak louder than her past? Finally, she set the folder down. "I'll do it. But on my terms. No blurred lines, no personal favors. This stays professional." Ethan nodded, relief flickering in his expression. "Agreed. Strictly business." But as their eyes met across the desk, both of them knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The partnership began with formal meetings in Naomi's office, schedules meticulously outlined and boundaries firmly in place. But as the Cultural Center project grew, so did the hours they spent together. What started as weekly consultations became late nights hunched over blueprints, coffee scattered across the table, voices rising and falling in passionate debate. Naomi found herself surprised by Ethan's commitment. He wasn't the detached financier she remembered from his younger days. He listened, challenged, and even sketched his own rough concepts, clumsy but earnest. "You're not bad," she teased once, eyeing his uneven lines. He smirked. "Not bad. That's practically a standing ovation coming from you." Their banter became a rhythm, sharp, playful, alive. And yet, beneath it all, a current hummed, unspoken but undeniable. One evening, they stood shoulder to shoulder in the half-lit model room, reviewing a 3D rendering projected onto the wall. Naomi explained her vision, a building that breathed with the community, open spaces where art and culture could thrive. Ethan listened intently, his gaze not just on the design but on her animated expression, the spark in her eyes. "You've always seen the world differently," he murmured, almost to himself. Naomi glanced at him, startled by the softness in his tone. "And you've always known how to make it listen," she replied, before quickly turning back to the screen. Hours slipped by until they realized the office was empty, silence wrapping around them like a cocoon. Ethan reached across her shoulder to adjust the projector, and the brush of his hand against hers froze them both. She turned her head, and suddenly their faces were inches apart. The air thickened, Charged. Ethan's breath caught, his gaze flickering between her eyes and her lips. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still, waiting. Naomi's chest tightened. She remembered the thrill of his kiss, the promises whispered in youth. The ache of what they had lost pulsed through her, tempting her to close the distance. But then Malik's face flashed in her mind, his laughter, his trust. With a sharp inhale, Naomi stepped back, breaking the spell. "We should focus," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Ethan exhaled slowly, frustration and longing mingling in his eyes. "You're right. Business." He forced a smile, though it didn't reach his gaze. Naomi gathered her notes quickly, keeping her back to him as she steadied herself. She had promised boundaries, and she would keep them. Still, as she walked away, she couldn't ignore the way her heart betrayed her. Pounding, restless, alive in a way it hadn't been in years. And Ethan, left standing in the glow of the projector, knew one thing for certain. The spark between them hadn't just reignited. It was burning. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, in the middle of a design review at Naomi's home office. Malik bounded into the room without knocking, his backpack half open and papers spilling out. "Mom, look," he exclaimed, holding up a certificate. "I won first place in the science fair." Naomi's face lit up with pride as she took the paper. "That's wonderful, Malik. I knew you'd do it." Ethan, who had been reviewing blueprints, looked up at the sound of the boy's voice. Something about the name snagged at his memory, but it wasn't until Naomi handed the certificate back that it hit him. Malik Brooks. His eyes darted between mother and son, suddenly noticing things he hadn't before, the tilt of the boy's chin, the spark in his eyes, the way he spoke with confidence beyond his years. "How old are you, Malik?" Ethan asked casually, his voice deceptively calm. 10, Malik replied proudly, before dashing off again, leaving the adults in stunned silence. 10. Ethan's breath caught. He did the math quickly, and the realization slammed into him. 10 years ago, he and Naomi had still been together, just before everything had fallen apart. His pulse raced, his grip tightening on the edge of the table. He turned to Naomi, his voice low but edged with demand. "Naomi, is he mine?" She froze, her eyes darkening. "Ethan, don't. Don't." His voice cracked, raw emotion seeping through. "You can't expect me not to ask. The timing, Naomi, it fits. I need to know." Her jaw clenched, her shoulders stiff. She looked away, busying herself with the scattered blueprints as if rearranging paper could erase the question. "Malik is my son," she said firmly, carefully avoiding the part of the sentence that mattered most. "Your son," Ethan repeated, his chest tight. "But is he?" Naomi cut him off, her tone sharp. "He's my responsibility, my world. That's all you need to know." Ethan's heart twisted. Her avoidance was answer enough, but it left him in torment. Every instinct screamed that Malik was his, but without her admission, he was trapped in uncertainty. Naomi finally met his gaze, her eyes blazing with a mix of fear and defiance. "Don't push this, Ethan. Malik has everything he needs. He doesn't need your money, your name, or your complications." He nodded slowly, swallowing the storm rising inside him. But as he left that evening, the boy's smile haunted him. And Ethan Sterling, a man who had conquered the world, realized he was powerless against one unanswered question. Was Malik his son? Ethan couldn't shake the revelation gnawing at him. Every sleepless night, every restless thought circled back to Malik, the boy's laughter, his bright mind, the familiar expressions Ethan saw in the mirror of his own childhood. It was unbearable not to know. One evening, unable to stand the silence any longer, Ethan appeared at Naomi's doorstep. His usually composed demeanor was fractured, his eyes shadowed with urgency. "Naomi," he said, his voice strained, "I can't live like this. I deserve the truth." She tried to stand firm, arms crossed, but her breath wavered. "Ethan, please. This isn't simple." "It is," he shot back, stepping closer. "That boy, Malik. Is he mine?" The air between them tightened. Naomi's defenses, so carefully built over the years, began to crumble under the weight of his persistence. She turned away, her fingers gripping the edge of the doorframe as though it might steady her. "Finally," she whispered. "Yes." Ethan froze. The word rang through him like a thunderclap. His chest heaved as the world tilted, memories colliding. The night before he left, the promises cut short, the love they had buried. "Yes," Naomi repeated, louder this time, as if forcing herself to own it. "Malik is your son. I found out after you left. I couldn't chase you down, Ethan. You made your choice to walk away, and I had to make mine. I chose to protect him, to raise him without questions, without the shadow of what you did hanging over his head." Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead, overwhelmed. Guilt surged like a flood. He had missed Malik's first steps, his first words, birthdays, scraped knees, the countless moments that stitched a childhood together. Regret cut deep, but beneath it, something stronger took hold, resolve. His voice broke, heavy with emotion. "I wasn't there, and I can't change that. But I'm here now. I won't walk away again. Naomi, I need to be part of his life." Tears glistened in Naomi's eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "You don't get to just show up and claim him, Ethan. He's not a prize. He's a boy who's happy, safe, and loved. If you're serious, you'll have to prove it, to me, and to him." Ethan straightened, determination hardening his features. "Then that's exactly what I'll do." For the first time in years, Naomi saw not just the billionaire standing before her, but the man she had once loved, the one who could fight for more than money. The days that followed were unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. He had run companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and bent markets to his will, but nothing compared to the quiet, vulnerable challenge of getting to know Malik. At first, Ethan approached cautiously, unsure how to step into a child's life without disrupting it. He started small, helping with homework when Malik wandered over after school, sharing tips on building model airplanes, and listening intently when Malik excitedly explained the details of a new science project. To Ethan's surprise, the boy opened up quickly. Malik's curiosity was boundless, and his laughter infectious. Ethan found himself looking forward to the afternoon spent together, moments that peeled away the layers of regret he had been carrying. He taught Malik how to swing a golf club in the backyard, laughed when the boy toppled over with the weight of it, and clapped proudly when Malik adjusted his stance and hit the ball cleanly. Naomi watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, but her expression softened more often than she realized. She had raised Malik to be cautious with strangers, yet she couldn't ignore the way her son gravitated toward Ethan, as though some invisible thread connected them. Still, fear lingered. She had built Malik's world carefully, and Ethan's presence threatened to rearrange it in ways she wasn't sure she could control. One evening, after a long day of project meetings, Ethan joined them for dinner. The table was warm with conversation, Malik talking animatedly about school. As Naomi cleared the dishes, Malik leaned against Ethan with childlike trust. "I wish you were my dad," he said innocently, his voice filled with the simple honesty of youth. Ethan's heart clenched. The words pierced straight through him, equal parts joy and sorrow. He swallowed hard, his hand resting gently on Malik's shoulder. "I'd be honored if I was," he replied softly, his voice thick with emotion. Naomi froze in the doorway, her back turned so they wouldn't see the tears she fought to hold back. Hope pressed at her heart, but fear whispered louder. What if Ethan disappointed Malik the way he had disappointed her? What if this bond broke as quickly as it had formed? But as she glanced back and saw her son's wide smile mirrored by Ethan's tender expression, Naomi couldn't deny the truth. Ethan was already becoming the father Malik had always longed for. It started with whispers in the neighborhood, curious glances at the block party, murmurs about how often Ethan Sterling was seen at Naomi Brooks's home. Soon, whispers turned into headlines. One morning, Naomi opened her front door to find a photographer across the street, camera clicking rapidly as if her quiet driveway were a runway. Later that day, her phone buzzed with a message from a friend. "Naomi, have you seen this?" Attached was an article splashed across a gossip site. Billionaire Sterling's secret new flame? Mystery woman and her son spotted. Naomi's stomach dropped. She scrolled through the photos, blurry shots of her and Ethan walking to the car, Malik laughing between them. It wasn't just invasive, it was terrifying. She had built a life of stability and safety for Malik, away from the scrutiny that came with wealth and power. And now, all of it was at risk of unraveling. That evening, she confronted Ethan, her voice tight with anger. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. My life isn't a headline, Ethan. Malik isn't a story for strangers to pick apart." Ethan's expression darkened as he read the article over her shoulder. His jaw clenched, guilt cutting deep. "Naomi, I never wanted this for you. The media, once they latch on, it's hard to shake them." "Hard to shake?" Naomi snapped. "Ethan, this is my son's life. His school, his friends, our home, it could all be ruined because you can't step outside without the world watching." Her words struck him harder than any boardroom betrayal. For the first time, Ethan saw the stark divide between his life and hers. His wealth had always bought him control, but here, control was slipping through his fingers. He stood silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "I'll handle it. If I have to keep my distance publicly to protect you, I will." "But Naomi," his eyes searched hers, raw and pleading. "I don't want to hide what we are anymore." Naomi's heart wavered, torn between fear of exposure and the pull of what they were rebuilding. The world had barged in, demanding answers neither of them were ready to give. And Ethan knew the hardest choice lay ahead: protect her peace or claim her as his, no matter the cost. Naomi paced her living room, the headlines still echoing in her mind. Each article, each whispered rumor felt like a knife reopening an old wound. She had been the scandal once before, the young black woman whispered about for daring to love the wealthy heir of the Sterling family. It had cost her dignity, her peace, and nearly her future. She had vowed never to let herself be defined by someone else's story again. When Ethan arrived that evening, his eyes heavy with regret, Naomi didn't wait for pleasantries. "This can't happen," she said firmly, her voice trembling with both fear and strength. He frowned. "Naomi." "No," she cut in sharply. "I won't do this again. I won't be paraded in the press, reduced to gossip, or dragged into your world like I don't matter outside of you. I spent years finding myself after you left. I built my career, my life, my son's future. I won't lose that. Not even for you." Her words struck like thunder, and for a moment Ethan couldn't breathe. He had faced ruthless competitors, ruthless boardrooms, but nothing pierced him like Naomi's rejection, because it wasn't just about him. It was about the ghost of the man he had once been, the man who had chosen ambition over love. "Naomi," he said finally, his voice hoarse, "I know I hurt you. I know I walked away when I should have fought. But I'm not that man anymore. I can't erase the past, but I can prove to you, to Malik, that I won't abandon you again." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "Words aren't enough. I believed your words once. They almost destroyed me." Ethan stepped closer, his expression raw with vulnerability. "Then I'll show you. I'll spend every day proving it until you believe me. Not because I'm a billionaire, not because of guilt, but because you're the only woman I've ever loved." Naomi's chest tightened, torn between longing and self-preservation. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of losing herself outweighed the temptation of hope. For now, she turned away, her silence louder than any refusal. And Ethan, standing in the quiet of her home, made a silent vow. This time, he wouldn't let her break alone. The headlines only grew louder in the weeks that followed. Paparazzi swarmed the quiet neighborhood, tabloids spun half-truths, and Naomi felt her safe world unraveling piece by piece. Ethan knew this was his doing. He had pulled her into the glare of his world, and unless he acted, she would pay the price for his choices. The breaking point came when his company prepared to finalize a billion-dollar international deal. The investors wanted a press conference, reporters buzzing with questions not only about the merger but about his personal life. Ethan stood at the podium, cameras flashing, voices shouting his name. The script in front of him outlined numbers, projections, growth strategies. But when a reporter called out Naomi's name, everything shifted. "Mr. Sterling, care to comment on the woman spotted with you? Is she just a neighbor, or something more?" Ethan gripped the microphone, heart pounding. For a moment, he saw Naomi's face in his mind, her quiet dignity, her desperate plea not to be made into a scandal. He could continue with the deal, drown out the noise, and pretend her privacy didn't matter. Or he could choose differently. He took a deep breath. "The deal is off," he said firmly, stunning the room. "Effective immediately." Gasps erupted. Investors whispered furiously, cameras zoomed closer, but Ethan pressed on. "Some things are worth more than numbers on a page. I've spent my life chasing power, but what I've learned is that real worth comes from the people who inspire us. Naomi Brooks is one of the most brilliant architects in this city. She's not a footnote in my story. She's the author of her own. And she deserves to be recognized for her genius, not reduced to a headline because of me." The conference dissolved into chaos, reporters shouting over one another, but Ethan stepped away from the podium with calm certainty. He had made his choice. When Naomi saw the broadcast later, she sat frozen, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, Ethan had chosen her, not by hiding her, not by making excuses, but by standing in front of the world and honoring her for who she was. Not the woman who once loved him, not the mother of his son, but Naomi Brooks, an accomplished architect with her own name and legacy. And in that moment, her guarded heart softened. Ethan Sterling was no longer the boy who left. He was a man willing to risk everything, not for power, but for love. The night after the press conference, Naomi sat on her porch, the soft hum of crickets filling the silence. She still couldn't believe what Ethan had done, walking away from $1 billion deal, choosing her privacy over power. No man in her life had ever sacrificed for her like that. She was lost in thought when she heard footsteps on the gravel path. Ethan stood at the edge of the porch, no polished suit, no boardroom armor. Just a man, his expression raw and unguarded. "Naomi," he said quietly, almost hesitant. "I need to say this. All of it." She gestured for him to sit, though her heart pounded in her chest. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood before her as though standing trial. "I've spent years pretending I had everything," he began, voice thick with emotion. "The mansions, the jets, the deals, they were supposed to fill the hole you left. But they didn't. None of it mattered. I'd trade every dollar, every ounce of power, just to go back and fight for you the way I should have." Naomi's breath hitched, her throat tightening. He stepped closer, his eyes shining with vulnerability. "I'm not asking as Ethan Sterling, billionaire. I'm asking as Ethan, the man who never stopped loving you. I know I broke your heart. I know I missed years I'll never get back with you and with Malik. But please, give me a second chance. Not to own you, not to save you, but to love you. To be here, fully, finally." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. She had promised herself she would never be vulnerable with him again, but his words stripped away the walls she had built. She saw not the man who left her, but the man who had grown, who had chosen love over power. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You think I ever stopped loving you? I tried, Ethan. I tried so hard. But the truth is, you never left my heart." A single tear slipped down her cheek, and Ethan reached to gently brush it away. For the first time in years, there was no pretense, no pride, just two souls finding their way back to each other. The dining room table glowed under the warm light of a hanging lamp. Naomi had set it with quiet care, unsure if this night would feel natural or unbearably awkward. Malik bounced in his chair, oblivious to the weight of the moment, chattering about his latest school project. Ethan sat across from him, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in a boardroom. The meal was simple, roast chicken, vegetables, and Naomi's homemade cornbread, but to Ethan it felt like a feast. For years he had eaten in gilded halls, surrounded by staff, never knowing the joy of something as ordinary as family dinner. Tonight, every laugh, every passing of a dish, every glance across the table carried a weight he had longed for without realizing. Malik peppered Ethan with questions between bites. "Did you really fly in a helicopter? Do you own a yacht? How many cars do you have?" Ethan chuckled, answering patiently, but always steering the conversation back to Malik. "That science fair project you won. Tell me more about how you built it. Sounds like you're the real genius here." Naomi watched, her heart tugging. She had feared this moment, that Ethan's presence might confuse Malik or stir up wounds. Instead, she saw her son glowing with a joy she hadn't seen before. For the first time, She allowed herself to imagine what life could be like with Ethan, not as a shadow from the past, but as part of their present. When dinner wound down, Malik leaned back in his chair, sleepy-eyed but smiling. He looked at Ethan with innocent sincerity and said, "You know, I really wish you could just be my dad." The room stilled. Ethan's throat tightened, his vision blurring. He reached for Malik's hand, his voice breaking as he whispered, "I'd be honored if I could be." Malik grinned. "Then you are. Your dad." The word cracked something open inside Ethan. Tears spilled before he could stop them. Years of regret and longing melting into the purest joy he had ever known. Naomi's own eyes filled as she reached across the table, her hand resting over Ethan's. For the first time in a decade, she let herself believe that love and family were not dreams lost to the past, but possibilities reborn. As laughter and warmth filled the room, Ethan looked around the table and knew. What began with the shock of a neighbor's return had ended in something far greater. Not just love rekindled, but a family, whole, at last.